Good morning, everyone. My name is Varun Soni, and I'm the Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life, as well as the Vice Provost of Campus Wellness and Crisis Intervention at the University of Southern California. I'm coming to you live from the beautiful University Religious Center on the campus of the University of Southern California on this beautiful winter day. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak with all of you today, to the alums of this university, of this illustrious university. I've gotten to know many of you over the last 12 years in my role here on campus, and I'm really happy to be able to speak with you virtually this morning. Today I wanted to talk about something that impacts our students, but really impacts all of us, and that is the rise of isolation and anxiety and a sense of disconnection that I see amongst our undergraduates and that I see amongst my peers too. When I became Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life at the University of Southern California in 2008, I essentially became the chaplain for the university. And in that role, I have the extraordinary opportunity, really the privilege of my lifetime, to be able to work with many different student groups, almost 100 religious groups on our campus, many different campus chaplains, more than 50 chaplains on our campus, within the context of pastoral care and spiritual counseling. And in that role, I really got to see the soul of the university. I got to see students in times of triumph and in times of tragedy. And the reason I wanted this job is because when I was an undergraduate, I used to spend time with my university chaplain. And I used to go to him and talk about the big questions in my life. Who am I? What does my life mean? How do I find meaning and purpose? How do I live an extraordinary life? And those are the conversations I really wanted to have with our students. And so when I started this job in 2008, those were the conversations I had with my students. Students would come to me and talk about the big questions in their life. And our students were really excited at that time. They wanted to go out and change the world. They wanted to be the change in the world that they wanted to see. And they would come to me and ask me, how do I live an extraordinary life? How do I translate my values into action, etc.? Over the last several years, I've been having very different conversations with students. Instead of talking about hope, many times students will talk to me about hopelessness. And instead of talking about meaning, sometimes our students are grappling with meaninglessness. And in the process, I began to see the rise of anxiety on our campus, the rise of stress and the pressure that students put on themselves. And over the last 5 years, I noticed a trend that was really heartbreaking. And I got a question that I never got before in my career. And that question was, how do I make friends? And that trend was a sort of a rise in a sense of loneliness. Our students are really lonely. They may have 1,000 friends online, but they struggle sometimes to make friends offline. And we know that loneliness has a physical health and a public health consequence too. Extreme loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And we know that historically, older generations of Americans have struggled with loneliness in a way that negatively impacted their lifespan. But now we're seeing something new. According to Cigna, a recent study conducted by them, the loneliest people in the United States right now are not the eldest, but the youngest. And specifically 18 to 22-year-olds. The loneliest people in the United States right now are college and university aged. And that breaks my heart, because on a campus of 50,000 students, this is the ideal time for students to really think about deep and loving relationships, meaningful relationships, and finding a place on campus. And so we're really thinking proactively, we're thinking upstream about how we create a culture where students thrive and flourish, where we prioritize healthy relationships, and where students feel like they belong. Because at the heart of this challenge is a sense of belonging, a sense of a tribe. Students are really looking for a tribe, and without a tribe, they don't feel like they belong. And if they don't feel like they belong, they don't fully feel human. And that has all sorts of negative mental, emotional, and spiritual health consequences. About 6 months ago, I was talking with our mayor, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. And we were talking about this challenge. And I said to him, I believe that the crisis on my campus is a crisis of loneliness and belonging. And he said to me that actually the crisis of our country is a crisis of loneliness and belonging. And that made me think about this in a whole different way. It's not just our students who are struggling in the age of anxiety and outrage. I think all of us are struggling in our own ways. I see it in my own life. I see it in the life of my friends and my peers and my colleagues, that we all feel overwhelmed, trying to balance work and family and the constant barrage of the news cycle. And it's hard to bring our full, authentic selves into every role we play, whether it be at work, whether it be at home, whether it be in the public sphere, because we're feeling overwhelmed, because we're feeling exhausted, and in some ways because we're feeling isolated. And that is the great irony and tragedy of this day, that in the age of hyperconnection, many of us feel disconnected. And in the age where it's so easy to reach out to people, many of us feel lonely. At work, this might manifest as a kind of burnout, that maybe we're feeling that we're emotionally exhausted, or we're feeling cynical about our work, or we're feeling that we're burning the candle at both ends, or we're feeling that we don't have the kind of control over our own destiny that we want, or that we're lacking meaning and purpose. I sometimes struggle with that, and I know that my colleagues and peers do as well. And that's part and parcel of always being on, always being reachable, always being connected to our phones. And so, if you are feeling this in your own life, here are some things that we're thinking about with our students that I think might also be helpful to us as we navigate the challenges of the day, which are very new for this generation. One of the things I tell my students is to focus on the big questions in their life. Focus on the questions that make them human, the questions that connect all of us with each other, the questions that connect all of us with everyone who's ever lived across space and time. Those are what I think of as existential and spiritual questions. Questions like, who am I? What does my life mean? What is my role in the world? How do I translate my values into action? What matters to me? Why does it matter to me? I think these questions allow us to think about not just ourselves, but our responsibilities to others, and also our place in the universe. And I think we're missing that. We're missing the idea sometimes that we're part of a larger whole, that it's not just me, it's we. And the more we lean into the we through the ultimate questions in our lives, the more we will feel connected, the more we will feel like we have a tribe, the more we will feel like we are a part of a larger whole. And that is essential, I think, for what it means to be human. So I would encourage all of us to ask the big questions in our life. Even if we don't know the answers, our students have always had the right answers. What I tell them is that it's important to have the right questions. And the very act of asking the questions is part of the process, part of the journey towards wholeness and healing, even if we don't know the answers. The questions are important to live, to breathe, to interrogate, etc. The second thing I tell my students is to be mindful of their devices. Our students are the first generation in human history to be digital natives. That means they were born and raised in an online social environment. They didn't migrate into this environment. They were raised in it. And so what does that mean? That means that our students have spent much of their life comparing their real lives to the idealized, Instagram, curated lives of others. And of course that makes them feel less than, or like they're an imposter, or that everyone's figured it out but them. That kind of pressure is relentless, it's intense, and in many ways it's illusory. It's not based on any reality. It's based on a construct, an image. And so I tell my students, be careful about your device use. Make your devices work for you. Don't work for them. And so what does that mean for all of us? That means that every once in a while we should take a break from our devices. Maybe we don't answer emails 24 hours a day. Maybe we take what's called an internet Sabbath. The very people who make our devices and create our social media platforms in Silicon Valley are also the people who have pioneered the idea of an internet Sabbath, where they won't go online during the weekend and they feel refreshed come Monday, reinvigorated, creative. And if they are able to do that, I think we are able to do that too. The third thing I would say, and let me say one more thing about devices. This is something that Arianna Huffington told me, is that it's important not to sleep next to your devices either. Put your devices to bed in a different room. The last thing you see at night shouldn't be your device, and the first thing you see in the morning shouldn't be your device. You should have time to unwind at night and to wake up to the day. That will help with sleep. It will help decrease anxiety. It will help with creating a sense of sanctuary at home that's away from work, and it's really hard to do, by the way. And another way I think that we're encouraging our students to think about their devices is by developing a mindfulness practice. We're at a point now where mindfulness meditation is not just a spiritual exercise, it's a scientific one. We have 20 years of research data to help us show how having a mindfulness practice, developing a non-judgmental sort of present moment awareness allows us to fully sort of embrace the moment, whereas our devices often take us away from the moment. And that present moment is so important because the moment is where we live. When the future comes, it's the present. When the past was here, it's the present. Our entire life will unfold within the present moment. And if we're not connected to the present moment, then in some ways we're not connected with our lives. And so a mindfulness practice gets us away from our devices and into the present moment. And I'm really happy to share with you that we have a free app for all of you to use. It's called Mindful USC. It's our mindfulness app for our mindfulness program on campus, but it's free for everyone. I know a lot of our alums have used it and have benefited greatly, and we'd love for you to check it out. You can download it on any app store. And the last thing I'll say is that it's really important, and perhaps it's the most important thing, is to focus on your relationships. What it means to be human is to have a tribe. What it means to be human is to be in community. What it means to be human is to have relationships that endure over time. My favorite study on this is called the Grant Study. It was the longest longitudinal study in human history. For 75 years, researchers followed Harvard undergraduates over the course of their life, from the time they were undergraduates to the time they died, to discover what was it that leads to human happiness? What is it that leads to human connection? What is it that gives one the sense that they are flourishing? When you're at the end of your life and you look back upon your life, what are the things that make you feel as though you lived a life worth living? And the researchers were very sophisticated. They spent $20 million on this study, and they analyzed the data from every angle from the humanities and the social sciences. And at the end of the day, they came up with one thing, more than anything, that was responsible for a life worth living, where people looked back on their life and said, that was the most important thing in my life. And it wasn't celebrity, it wasn't salary, it wasn't net worth, it wasn't status, it wasn't education or degree. The most important thing for us to feel as though we are living a life worth leading is how deep and loving are our relationships. Relationships, 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 or as the lead researcher of the Grant Study said, after 75 years and $20 million spent, the conclusion of the Grant Studies is a simple 5-word conclusion. Happiness is love, full stop. And we know that love comes from celebrating the relationships that mean the most to us. If you're in Los Angeles or even around the world, this might be a sad day for you. I know that our city is in mourning because of the untimely and tragic death of Kobe Bryant and of those aboard the helicopter that he was on, especially the 3 13-year-old girls, the teammates of his daughter. It's devastating for all of us if we were sports fans, and especially if we're parents. And I think what that tragedy sort of highlights for us, and when I got to spend time with Kobe, he knew this very well. We would talk about this. What it highlights for us is how fragile and how urgent life is, how important life is, and how impermanent life is, that we shouldn't take any of our moments for granted. Having an understanding of the fragility and impermanence in life gives us a renewed zest for living, gives us an opportunity to think about what's really important. And in this way, I've really been moved by the work of Bronnie Ware, who was a palliative care nurse for 15 years. She did hospice care work for 15 years. For 15 years, she sat with patients on their deathbeds. She had the most authentic and honest conversations with her patients, with her, who became her friends in some ways, as they were dying, where they had absolute clarity over their life, where they were at their most vulnerable and their most honest. And what she noticed was that on their deathbeds, her patients basically had the same 5 regrets. She heard them over and over again over the course of 15 years. And my sense of what it means to thrive now is to live a life where you don't have those regrets. And she wrote a book about it, appropriately called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And those 5 regrets are, number 1, I wish I had the courage to live the life true to me, not the life others expected of me. Number 2, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Number 3, I wish I hadn't worked so hard at my job. No one is on their deathbed wishing they had put more hours in at work. No one is lamenting the loss of a promotion or the fact that they didn't graduate a year early. No one is thinking about their professional trajectory. Most people are thinking about the time they wish they had spent with the people they loved. Number 4, I wish I had spent more time with the people I loved. I wish I had kept in touch with my friends, and that goes right back to relationships. And number 5, I think, is an interesting one. I wish I had allowed myself to be happier, so that at one's moment of death, one thinks about the fact that happiness might have been a choice. Maybe happiness isn't something we are or not, but something we choose or don't choose. And then, in the choosing of happiness, what do we choose? We choose relationships. We choose contemplation. We choose community. We choose to ask ourselves the big questions. We choose to tell the people who we love that we love them. We choose to do the things that are in our control. Not everything that happens out in the world is in our control. Most things that happen out in the world actually are not in our control. But what happens in here is in our control. Where we really have power is in our mindset, in the way we interpret the things that happen out there. And that's a choice. Our mindset is a choice, and my hope for all of us is that we choose not a fixed mindset that sees the world in binary terms, success, failure, right, wrong, black, white, but a growth mindset that allows us to grow and evolve over time so that we can grow in our strengths, grow in our talents, grow in our gifts, and grow in our love. And I think if we're able to do that, and it's hard to do, but it can be an aspiration, it can be a North Star, it can be something that we try to orient ourselves towards, even if we don't often achieve it. But if we're able to do that, then I think we can proactively combat a sense of isolation, disconnection, loneliness that seems to be really plaguing people of all generations. So, all that being said, I look forward to reading your comments here and answering some questions. Let's see if we have any questions here. Not sure, I'm not super tech savvy here, so I'm not, okay, here we go. So one question that comes up quite a bit is the work-life balance question. How do you achieve a sense of balance if you're going to be sort of extraordinary in your work, but also extraordinary in your life outside of work? That's a tough one. I wish I had answers because I myself don't model a good work-life balance. I've struggled with this throughout my life because how do you have work-life balance if you are in a job which requires you to be present, sometimes on the front line of care? That can take a toll on the caregiver, et cetera. And so I've struggled with this question too. Maybe in our comment sections, other people can share with others how they might navigate this challenge. But what I have found is that I can't in my life find work balance on a day-to-day basis. It's hard to do if you're putting in 12 hours days. I sometimes leave work before I see my kid and I get home after she's in bed. We're living under the same roof, and there could be a several-day period where I don't see her, and that's really painful for me, and I hope for her too. Maybe not, but I hope so. And so I think that in that respect, what I have come to in my own life is the idea that work-life balance might not happen for me on a day-to-day basis or even on a week-to-week basis. But because I work on a semester system, what I can do is I can go hard for 4 months and then I can breathe. And then I can go hard for 4 months and then I can breathe. I don't have to go for 12 months, but I can go for 4. I can go over the semester and then I can take a breath. So I don't know if I have work-life balance in my day-to-day life. but I do try to cultivate a sense of work-life balance over the course of the year. Maybe not over the course of the week, but over the course of 12 months. And so when I do have time with my kid, I can really carve out time, significant time, a long time, where we make up in some ways for the time that we missed. I think another thing that's essential in the work-life balance, which I think all of us it might be a little more realistic, is to balance out nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Sometimes the reason we feel bad isn't because of some existential crisis or concern. Sometimes the reason we feel bad is because we haven't slept, or we're not hydrated, or we haven't exercised, or we're not eating right. All those things are connected. You know, your physical health is connected to your mental health, is connected to your emotional health, is connected to your spiritual health. We are whole people. And so when something is out of whack, it throws everything sometimes out of whack. And so I think one of the things I try to do for balance, even though it's not focused on the relationships in my life, is to try to carve out some time to exercise, try to carve out some time to contemplate, try to carve out some time to get 7 hours of sleep, to eat properly, etc. And to model that kind of behavior so that when I'm talking to students about it, I can point to my own life and my own sort of experiences as a potential example. And so I think that's something that all of us can do, thinking about that convergence of nutrition and sleep and exercise. And it's hard to find the time sometimes, but what I realize is that if I'm rejuvenated, if I'm rested, if I feel good physically, I can actually do more at work. And herein lies, I think, something that I was never taught but have come to realize. That when you're looking after yourself, that's not selfish. You know, it seems so obvious, but it took me a long time to figure that out. That taking care of yourself is not selfish. Actually, taking care of yourself is a necessary precondition for taking care of others. And if I feel rejuvenated personally, if I feel connected personally, if I feel inspired personally, then I can go out and be a better professional. So that even though when we think we're taking time away from work, maybe we're not being a good professional, the reality is that you actually are being a better professional by empowering yourself to achieve the things that you can achieve. When I first got this job, one of my fellow deans gave me great advice. She told me, I can do this job, I can do 12 months of work in 11 months, but not in 12 months. Meaning that if she took that month to herself, she could actually do more work over the remaining 11 months. And I have found that to be the case too. That if I start the year rejuvenated, I can do so much more. But if I'm just dragging myself to the starting line, it becomes really difficult to fully be there in the lives of my students in the way that I think is meaningful for them. So the question is, can you share the name of the book or books that we shared some thoughts from today? So some books that I would recommend. One is called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. That's what I referenced, by Bronnie Ware. That's her book about her time as a palliative care nurse and the conversations she had with patients in hospice care. The other book I briefly mentioned was a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Carol is a psychologist at Stanford. She spent a lot of her career working with college students, so she has unique perspective, I think, into the challenges and pressures that our undergraduates are going through. And she outlines two ways of thinking about the world, two mindsets. The first is the fixed mindset, which really sees the world as fixed, that you have inherent talents or inherent intelligence, and that your job is to prove to people in the world over and over again that you are intelligent and that you do have these skills, and that whatever accolades you get are well-deserved. That's the mindset many of our students come in with, because they have to. Because if they didn't have a fixed mindset, they wouldn't have the test scores or the grades to get into a school like USC. But I tell them their real opportunity is to move from a fixed mindset while they're at USC to a growth mindset. A growth mindset says it's not what you're born with, it's what you do. It's not about your inherent talent, it's about your effort. It's about your work. It's about your vision. It's about your creativity. It's not about the destination, but it's about the journey. It's not about the answers, but it's about the questions. And I think this kind of mindset, the growth mindset, which psychologists now align with thriving and flourishing, it's a thriving mindset. That kind of mindset is a mindset we can all try to cultivate in our lives, no matter where we are, what station we're at. When I'm not working, what are some ways that we turn off to be present with family and loved ones? For me, my sacred time is being on my bike. I think everyone has sacred time, partly because being on a bike is good exercise, but mostly because I don't have to be anything when I'm on my bike. I don't have to be dean, vice provost, professor. I don't have to be father, son, husband. I can kind of just be me. And I can kind of think about the things that are important to me. And I'm lucky I live by the beach, so I bike up and down the beach, the Marvin Road beach path, so it also puts me in communion with nature in the same way that hiking does for me. And hiking and biking for me are ways in which I can combine sort of a physical exercise with a type of contemplative opportunity. I have found that when I'm not thinking about work, I get my best ideas for work. The aha moments come when you're not thinking about the thing. That's why it's important to prioritize well-being in a way that allows you to have a blue sky mind, where you don't, or you know, when you're always thinking about something, you oftentimes miss the creative angle. That's why so much of discovery comes from newcomers. When newcomers come into a field, they take maybe a different perspective on the field, and they see it in a different way, in a way that people who've been in that field for a long time really see it from a more traditional way. And so I think when you're not thinking about work, when you're communing with nature, when you're exercising, when you have carved out some time for your own passion, your own hobby, your own love, your own joy, you are going to have these aha moments about work and about life when you're not thinking about them at all. That will be the most profound and important thoughts that you have about work and life. But in the absence of creating that thinking space, that contemplative space, that sanctuary, it's hard to have those thoughts. And once again, I think that's an example of how taking care of yourself is actually good for you as a professional. And finally, what are 3 quick tips that will help people trying to move towards the growth mindset? I sort of touched on them already, but I think one idea of the growth mindset is to focus on the journey. The beauty is in the walking. We are blinded by the destination. If all we are doing is moving from accomplishment to accomplishment, and then as soon as we get there, moving to the next one, well, life is happening between those goals. And actually, life is happening in the present moment. If all we're doing is trying to accomplish the next goal, we're thinking and living in the future, not in the present. And so, of course, you have to move towards particular goals in your life, but what does it mean to also be in the present moment? The great modernist painter, Georgia O'Keeffe, said, people don't really see a flower anymore because it takes time to see a flower, like it takes time to have a friend. And my concern is that we don't have time anymore. We don't have time to see the flower, and we don't have time to have a friend. If we can create that time, take that time, make that time, then I think we can move towards a growth mindset because the metrics of success are so different. And that leads me to the next point, which is I think we have to redefine what success is. We have a very narrow view of success, I think, in terms of American culture, where it really is focused on celebrity, status, and salary, what other people think of you as opposed to what you think of yourself, your net worth as opposed to your self-worth. But the science and the spirituality tell us that success is much bigger than that. That true success also means that you have healthy relationships, that you're courageous, that you have an ethical worldview, that you believe that you're part of a greater whole, that you cultivate joy and gratitude in your life, that you're service-oriented. And those things are choices that we make in our own life, and often with a different definition of success. So I often tell our students who have succeeded in everything they do, when they get to campus, they might not be the only valedictorian for the first time in their life. They might not be the only, the best athlete or musician for the first time in their life, and that is really difficult for them because their idea of success is to be the best. But what I tell them is that in order to succeed spectacularly, sometimes you have to fail spectacularly. And all the people who they admire greatly have failed spectacularly, and that's why they succeed. You know, Wayne Gretzky said that you miss every shot you don't take. Michael Jordan said he missed thousands of shots in his career. He failed over and over again, and that's why he succeeds. Thomas Edison told us that after 10,000 attempts of creating a light bulb that failed, he finally found one that worked. He said, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work before I found one that did. I think we have to think of failure as success. We have to fail forward into success. We have to throw 10 things to the wall and see which 2 or 3 stick. We have to shoot for the sky and we may hit the roof. If we shoot for the roof, we may not get off the ground. And so if we think of failure as a kind of success, if we wear it as a badge of pride and honor, if we're focused on the effort, not so much on the rewards or fruits of that effort, then we kind of cultivate a growth mindset, which gets us into a space where we can fully embrace the things that matter and the things that make us human. So I'm really grateful to all of you for joining us. I know it's early on a Tuesday morning, but I've had a great time speaking with you. I appreciate the comments, the questions. Please feel free to continue the conversation in the comments section. If any of you want to follow up with me directly, just email me, please. I'd love to hear from you, and if you're on campus, come see me. I wish you all the best in your life and in your work. May you find the joy and gratitude, peace and prosperity and health and happiness that you seek. And until next time, fight on.